A soldier's life. The average age of a Civil War soldier was 25. However, boys as young as 12 went into battle as drummer boys. For young soldiers and old, life on the Civil War battlefields was dirty, dangerous, and difficult. Battles were horrible, but long, boring waits between battles were hard too. Most battles were in the South, where summers were very hot. Soldiers almost always traveled on foot, and might march up to 25 miles a day. The supplies in their backpacks weighed as much as 50 pounds. Marching proved even more difficult for Confederate soldiers. The Union blockade kept supplies from reaching the Southerners, so soldiers could not replace worn-out shoes. They often marched and fought in bare feet. Food was a problem too. It was rarely fresh. The army supplied beef and pork. Both were preserved, so they did not spoil. Fresh pork had been salted to become salt pork. Beef was pickled, or preserved in water and spices. In addition, the troops had beans and biscuits. These biscuits were tough flour and water biscuits called hardtack. To survive, troops raided local farms to steal fresh fruits and vegetables. 3. Soldiers were away from home for long periods during the war. Explain what this photo tells you about how families solved this. Sick and wounded. In the mid-1800s, the idea that germs caused disease was a new and untested theory. Most doctors hadn't heard of it. Many doctors never washed their hands or medical instruments. A wounded soldier who made it to a hospital might be put in a bed in which someone had just died of fever, without the sheets being changed. Infections were common, and disease spread quickly. There were few medicines and no antibiotics. Twice as many soldiers died of disease as died of gunshot wounds. Caring for the soldiers. At this time, there were almost no nursing schools in the United States. Most nurses learned as they worked, and most were volunteers. One nurse described a field hospital this way. Just across the lawn, there are some of the worst cases, and the sights and sounds we have to encounter daily are most distressing. I am mightily afraid we shall have some sort of infectious fever here, for it is impossible to keep the place clean, and there is a bad smell everywhere. Clara Barton was the most famous of the volunteer nurses. She went out to where the soldiers were. Barton said her place was anywhere between the bullet and the battlefield. At the Battle of Antietam, as the cannons boomed, she held the operating table steady for the surgeon. She became known as the Angel of the Battlefield. After the war, in 1881, she founded the American Red Cross. Hundreds of women helped on both sides. Juliet Opie Hopkins from Alabama cared for Confederate soldiers. In 1861, she sold all her property and gave the money to the Confederacy to establish hospitals. She organized medical services in Richmond, Virginia, and then for the whole state of Alabama. Hopkins was shot twice while rescuing wounded men on the battlefield. 4. Identify 2 things you might do to help nurse soldiers.